What's up, Restoration Nation? Rico Garcia here. I'm really excited about this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you guys that we have a brand new Restoration Domination hotline, hear from you line, whatever it is that you want to call it. The phone number is 678-TALK-TO-US. So that's 678-TALK, the number 2, and then us. And this is an opportunity for you, the viewer, the listener, to go ahead and pick up the phone, shoot us a call, and leave a voicemail. Leave a comment, leave a suggestion, leave us with some thoughts on who you'd like to have on the show. Or if you're going to restorationdomination.com and you're following along with who our next upcoming guest might be, and you have a specific question for them, make sure that you pick up the phone, leave us a question. Let us know your name, where you're from, your company, and what we'll do is we'll take that snippet and we'll plug that into the podcast and give you a shout out. And it would just be an amazing way to hear from each and every single one of you that are supporting the Restoration Domination movement, which again, thank you so much for all of your love and your support. So just wanted to go ahead and remind you guys that you do have access to that. On this episode, really excited because we're joined by Dan Cassara, the CEO of the Core Group, which I'm sure lots of you in the restoration arena are familiar. Dan is an amazing individual. He's super dynamic. He's sharp as a tack. Really enjoyed having the conversation and his views on what Core is really all about and the benefits that Core offers to its members, and not only to its members, but to the consumer. We talk about company growth, we talk about mindset, we talk about marketing. Tons of topics were discussed here on this episode. Dan is such an amazing individual. We had tons of fun on this particular podcast. But before we dive into the podcast, just want to go ahead and give a few shout outs to our sponsor. And first and foremost, our sponsor for this show, which is really exciting, is Total Ads Domination. Yes, my own digital course, which you should be taking part of. And what is Total Ads Domination all about? Well, if you've been listening to the podcast or watching these videos, you understand how passionate I am about having restoration contractors, or contractors as a general whole, right? Anybody in the home service business really take control of their marketing, because at the end of the day, you're not a water mitigation or a roofer or a public adjuster. Like, that's not what you do. Really what you do is you are a marketer who markets those services, right? You market your public adjusting service, your water mitigation, mold remediation services, and that's just the service that you end up providing. But ultimately, it's all about dominating the ad space. And what we've done is I've put together a very in-depth digital course that you would have access to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, lifetime access to dominating Google Ads in particular. In other words, everything that you've ever wanted to know about Google Ads, everything that your marketing agency does not want you to know about Google Ads is available in this course. How to do the keyword research. More importantly, how to know exactly the successful ads that your competition is currently running that's driving revenue. And why is this important? Because if you know where to look and you know what revenue or what ads are already successful, well, then guess what? You can go ahead and mimic the exact same look, style, and feel and generate that revenue for your business, and tons of other really amazing ninja tricks that you learn in this course, as well as the coaching program that we do each and every single week. We get together on a Zoom call. So if you have any questions, you have any concerns, once you are a member of the Total Ads Domination course and coaching program, you're going to have access to that. If you want to check that out, there's a link below in the show notes and or in the video description below. You can go ahead and check that out. It's going to take you to a landing page where you're going to have access to a couple of free resources. Once you go ahead and plug in your email in there, you can download your free resources, which are amazing, by the way. And then that's going to lead you to the offer page where you're going to be presented with an opportunity. By the way, we've discounted it just so that we can go ahead and help you guys out, where you can go ahead and purchase the course and the coaching program, and you will have immediate access sent to your email. So make sure that you check that out. Next up, I want to go ahead and thank CNR Magazine for sponsoring the show. Again, if you don't have your subscription yet to CNR Magazine, just go on over to cnrmagazine.com. There's a big red button on the upper right-hand corner of the website. Just go ahead and hit subscribe, and then you can keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the restoration arena. You get to hear from amazing entrepreneurs in our space and all the new changes that are happening in your industry, which lately seem to be quite a bit. Also want to go ahead and mention, make sure that you keep an eye out for our public adjusting corner as well as our legal corner. So our attorney at the legal corner here at Restoration Domination is lovingly known as Lawyer Britt, and that's Brittany Alexander. She's an amazing attorney, and every month we're going to be releasing a legal corner where we're going to be talking about new changes to the laws, things having to do with AOBs and contracts, new statutes, case studies, things of that nature, things that could ultimately impact your business as a restoration owner or a contractor or anyone in the home services trade. This is going to be something that you're not going to want to miss. So again, this would be a great opportunity. If you have a case study, if you have a question, if there's always been this thing in the back of your mind about, hey, how does this work on a legal standpoint? This would be a great opportunity. Pick up the phone, 678 talk to us, and just be like, hey, this is so-and-so with such and such. I have the question for Lawyer Britt. This is the question. And then we'll go ahead and plug that into the podcast, and live, not only do you get the shout out, but you will also have your questions answered by an amazing attorney. Also in the public adjusting corner, which is also going to be released once every month, is going to be Carlos Machine, lovingly called the Claims Machine. He is an amazing public adjuster. He and I have worked on several files in the past, and we're going to be discussing case studies, how to properly document all of your projects, not only to potentially hand it off to a public adjuster, but also the benefits, the pros and cons, when to use a public adjuster, when not to. And then, of course, some amazing case studies of public adjusters that have handled files and what the ultimate outcome has been. So that's going to be really exciting as well. And again, if you have questions and or comments about public adjusting, or you as a mitigation or restoration contractor, about how those relationships and what that dynamic looks like, or anything, right? Any comments whatsoever, just pick up the phone, shoot us a call, 678 talk to, again, that's the number 2, us, and leave a voicemail and say, hey, look, just want to leave a comment for, Carlos, the Claims Machine. And we'll go ahead and pull out that snippet and we'll play it live over the podcast. So tons and tons of great, new, exciting things happening in Restoration Domination, all, of course, for your benefit and for your entertainment. And then without further ado, let's dive right in to the interview with Dan Cassara. I know that you're going to enjoy. Take notes.
Owning any type of restoration business is demanding of your time, your energy, and resources. And that's why we're here. This is Restoration Domination. If you're a contractor in water mitigation, mold remediation, biohazard cleanup, roofers, or public adjusters, you'll learn how to dominate using some of the techniques and strategies that our guests will share. We'll interview top industry insiders, movers and shakers, hustlers and hackers, and anyone dominating their industry. This is Restoration Domination. Hustle, hack, and dominate. And here's your host, Rico Garcia.
All right, guys, what is going on? Another episode of Restoration Domination. Really excited. We've got a really amazing guest, huge organization. I'm sure lots of you are going to be familiar with the name. Dan, welcome to the show, man. How are you?
Thanks, Rico. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Cool. Do me a favor, man. Just fill in some of the gaps with the introduction there. For those that are listening and or watching, maybe they're not quite familiar with your organization. Kind of give us the quick little 1-2 punch.
Absolutely. Yeah, so my name is Dan Cassara. I'm the founder and CEO over at Core Group. And Core is a national network of best-in-class property restoration providers. We operate a series of membership businesses here at Core, as well as a very unique hybrid un-TPA, as we like to call it. here, a business that helps serve high net worth commercial and insurtech carriers and aligning themselves with the very best providers in the industry and eliminating some of what we call the fake work involved in doing some of that work and really giving the power back in the hands of the restorer.
Which is amazing. So let's talk about the un-TPA, right? Because that's such that's amazing. Can you dig a little bit deeper into that?
Sure. Yeah. So in my career history, in my previous life, I was the CEO of several organizations, a couple of which were TPAs, in our industry. What I learned very quickly about myself is that I didn't want to build a career around building a business that was really one-sided. So I think a lot of TPAs serve a need in our industry, and they certainly serve a client base, but it is a bit one-sided where contractors constantly feel like they're not getting the good end of the stick, if you will. So we built a system that was really all about putting the focus back on the customer, which is actually the insured and the homeowner and the business owner and the people that actually receive these services. And so in doing so, we actually decided that we were going to build a system that created win-wins between the contractor and the carrier. So we started, slow, like every other business. We picked it up with just building a contractor base. Some of those early adopters, didn't see a lot of work coming down the pipeline, which is understandable because we're building it from the ground up. And we literally built it from a coffee shop in Northern California. It started, grassroots, and then started to get some traction with some of the most amazing clients in our industry. And now we've got a really great carrier partnership base of companies that believe that customer service is really the pinnacle of that delivery system. And so that backed with some really great technologies and providers that are doing a really good job at taking care of the insured. That's really our only focus. It's not about some of the work that goes into some of these other programs, like making sure you check a box by a certain amount of time or making sure that the arriving on site and all that stuff is critical to the experience, obviously. But making sure you upload photos within 24 hours versus by the time the job's done, those sorts of things. We've eliminated some of that stress and given power back to the contractor to be able to actually deliver really great service. So we get kind of thrown into that bucket of being a TPA because we give work to contractors, right, obviously. But there's a lot of programs out there outside of the insurance space that give work to contractors and they're not TPAs. And so we really struggle with that title because it's not really who we are, and it's not the spirit in which our organization was built.
So how do you combat that? Because again, once you have this, badge, right, or people identify you
sure,
as a TPA, it's kind of hard. I'm not a TPA, but that obviously is not the ideal message. So how do you combat that?
Well, it's difficult because if you think about it, just a year and a half or so ago, the Restoration Industry Association put out a TPA survey, and we got ranked as one of the highest or the highest in the TPA survey based on the experience by contractors. And so on one hand, you're honored. Thank you for recognizing us. Right. That's so great. But on the other hand, we're not a TPA.
Right.
And we're really not a TPA. Yes, we distribute work to contractors, but it's just constant education. It's really getting people to understand that. And, it's hard because I think there's a lot of PTSD, and it sounds crazy. There's a lot of PTSD in this industry with contractors who are just like, I've had enough and I don't want to do this anymore. And it's an ongoing conversation that I have with contractors on a regular basis, that my team has with contractors on a regular basis. And so it's kind of having to unravel that trauma that they kind of feel like, they feel like they're not able to run a successful business, but they have to be on these programs, right? So you've got this kind of conundrum that they're dealing with. And we constantly say, there are some programs that are really great and they will give you great work and they, solid work, and that's all great. But at the end of the day, you've got to make a business decision as to which ones you want to align yourself with, So.
Right, exactly. And just, look, I don't have a horse in the race. I've spoken to so many people on both sides, right? 100% sure, independent, people that are doing tons of program work. And depending on how you're built and depending on how your business is structured, there isn't necessarily a right or wrong, right? Like if you take a lot of the
correct,
people that are doing TPA work that are wildly successful at what they do, by the way, still offer great service, and you were to go ahead and take that program work away and they had to hunt for, probably, making this sound a little bit worse than what it is. But if you make them hunt for their own meals, right, all of a sudden they don't do well in that game. And vice versa. There's guys that can generate tons of business independently. They go straight to consumer. They have great relationships with business owners. They're great. But then once they get in program work, it's like all hell breaks loose and the system just breaks. So I think a lot of it has to do with, I think, the mindset in which you're going into whatever business structure you're trying to build. And then number two, like, what are you really comfortable doing? Like, how good is your back end, right? So when you're approaching, well, and again, I don't even know if this is correct, but I mean, I'm assuming that at some point you guys approach contractors, or at this point, contractors are just approaching you. Like, what does that conversation look like, right? Because these have got to be like legitimate concerns. It's like, okay, well, are you a TPA? You're not a TPA. Okay, great. Well, now we know that you're not a TPA. What's the real benefit? Like, where do I shine by being part of group, of CORE?
Well, so it's interesting that I'm glad you said what you just said, because a lot of people don't recognize that not all restorers are the same. Their companies are structured differently. They moved up in the industry in different ways. They got in at different times, because, I'll have a conversation with a company that's been in business for 4 years versus one that's been in business 30 years, and they have a completely different set of values and really what got them there, right? So that's really, really interesting. So for us, it becomes very dynamic, because every time we have a conversation with a contractor, we have to ask that owner or that leadership team, what's valuable to you, right? Because we offer a whole toolbox of resources, and that toolbox, some things you might not care about, and someone else may think that's the end all do all. That's just why I'm here. And so CORE is unique in that it's really not about the claims. A lot of organizations will say it's not about the claims, but it really isn't at CORE. We have members that have joined CORE, and those members have joined a system that gives them a ton of resources to help them be successful. Now, what's also interesting is you've got different types of restorers. You've got the franchises, you've got the independents, you've got the folks that are part of a larger contractor group of systems. There's so many different makes and models, right, of a restorer today. And so what we look for is successful, independently owned operators who are looking for that edge to kind of take their business to the next level. And so that edge for us is a whole toolbox of things. Our smallest members do, say, $500,000 in revenue. Largest members do several $100 million in revenue. So very different value set when you look at what matters to one company or the other. But what's unique about them is they all do one thing, is they all share our values here at CORE. And they all care about collective growth amongst the group of other companies. So when you look at a CORE company, if you were to interview them independently and not ask them, or tell them rather that you're talking to all of them, they would all have that one thing in common, which is the one thing that we look for. We look for companies who are in this to better the industry, to elevate the industry, and to elevate each other. And that's a really big piece of our value proposition. So we give those companies everything from marketing resources to best practices to you name it. I mean, it's all available to them, to significant cost savings on the things that they buy every day through our buying program. And our marketing team alone is an entire agency in-house that does everything from business cards to lapel pins to truck wraps to double-decker trade show booths. They do it all, which is pretty impressive to have that all under kind of one roof. And we offer all of those resources to these guys as a way to say, you don't have to do this alone. I love the old adage, you're in business for yourself, not by yourself. Right. And that's a big reason why CORE has been so successful. And the companies that have adopted it have seen that brotherhood, if you will, even though a few of our companies are female owned, and they're some of our best, just amazing members of our organization, but they are a part of this group that is it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
Right. So best practices, right? And again, we're going to get into some of the suites and some of these benefits, right, of being part of CORE. But best practices, like, what was the evolution of best practices, right? Because best practices 5 years ago, best practices today, things change, right? The market changes, sentiment changes.
Absolutely.
And also, when CORE was in its infancy, it's like, well, where did you draw from where did you draw these best practices from, right? So like, what was that evolution like?
So what I always like to say is CORE is, a 4-year-old company that was 22 years in the making. I've been in the industry 22 years. I've held a lot of roles in this industry. My leadership team, our management team, are folks that are not new to this industry. And so we have pooled a lot of our own knowledge to the table of what works and what doesn't work, and what has worked, and what worked then doesn't necessarily work now. Right. I have helped hundreds of companies in my career, exponentially grow their businesses. But you're right; those best practices have changed, throughout the course of time. And so, as this industry has become more and more saturated with more and more restorers, because I think a lot of restorers don't realize how many restorers actually exist in this space. Over 50,000 restorers exist in North America.
That number
That's
is all over
massive.
the place, by the way. You ask 10 different people, you get 10 different numbers as to, yeah,
Really?
absolutely.
Yeah, no, there's data that supports it's over 50,000. I don't know what else someone else is saying, but I only know what I've read. But yeah, it is incredibly saturated. But now you've got consolidation happening too at a massive rate, obviously. And everyone in this industry thinks they're going to be consolidated, even though that's not going to happen. So I will talk to a restorer and say, what's your plan if you don't get consolidated? What's the plan if you can't get on programs and what's the plan? Or if you're a heavy program company, what happens when you get taken off of these programs? Like, do you know how to hunt and fish for yourself? Because that in itself is the key to success in this industry. Longevity is based on how fast you can adapt to this industry, how fast you can adapt to the new way of doing things, and really teaching. What I love about this company and what I love about what I do is getting a chance to teach restorers how to love what they do again. That's the one thing, is getting them excited about being in restoration again, because it can be a grind, right? It's a tough industry to be in. And so, to get them to love what they do again, to be passionate about their business, but then on top of that, teach them how to sustain this without outside influences is really, really the key. And we try not to be an outside influence. We try to go, hey, we're just tools in your toolbox. Like, you can tap into as little or as much as you want. You don't have to do it all. But the ones that really take advantage of that and really get to using those tools and actually using the tools include other members, really being able to tap into other members and say, like, how did you do this?
And there's so much power in that, right? Because again, sometimes you're way too, and we've all experienced this, right? You're in business, you're too close to a situation, you just can't get it right. You're like, what's going on? And then somebody who's not even in the business just looks at it and is like, oh, here, this is your problem right here, right? Or, we've all had that one buddy that was in that really bad relationship, and he's like madly in love, and we're like, bro, what are you doing? Like, this is bad stuff, right? Because he's too close, he can't see it. So just there's so much power in having a collective group of individuals that are kind of striving towards the same thing, even though they're all doing it independently. And one thing that I've noticed about the industry lately, and probably I would say more so than 10 years ago from what I've heard, is just the degree of collaboration that now exists. I mean, if you look at the amount of content that was out in the market when it came down to the restoration industry, there really wasn't a whole lot. I mean, you had a couple of big companies that were putting out their little tidbits of information, but it was all very, like how to dry a little bit better. Like, it doesn't really move the needle for an entrepreneur. What's your take on that? I mean, have you noticed that there's been a much more openness about, being collaborative, about sharing information, sharing success metrics, things of that nature?
Well, I think it's still very siloed. So, my team and I, we sit on a lot of these Facebook groups and we watch the chatter that's kind of happening.
A fly on the wall.
And if you go into these, exactly. And we don't actually contribute. It's actually kind of funny. We just look to see, like, what are the contractors
You're keeping the finger on the pulse of the market,
and
right? Just kind of, totally get it.
Precisely. Yeah. And what's really interesting is that, we did something a couple of years back, and this was sort of the perfect litmus test of, like, showing you how these groups are sort of different. We decided that we were going to subsidize the cost of Xactimate licenses for the entire industry. We were like, you know what? If we're going to elevate this industry, let's help contractors save money. So we committed to and financially purchased significant amount, thousands of licenses, right? And then said to the market, to everyone in the market, naturally our members said, oh, this is natural. Core did this. Great. We're going to save money on these licenses because Core is subsidizing the difference in cost. And it was truly a bottom. It came off of our bottom line. We were just like, you know what, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna really show the industry that we care. And so we went into some of these Facebook groups and said, hey, I don't know if you know this, but Core is subsidizing these licenses for Xactimate, and you're paying full price. Let us help pay for some of that, just to help you some more money on your bottom line. And the angry responses we were getting out of some of these groups, and I thought, okay, so interesting. Not everyone's looking at it from the same lens we are, right? Not everyone realizes we're actually here to help. A lot of these guys are really upset by the abuse that they feel like they've taken, right? And they've created, like, this animosity amongst each other. And I fully expected there to be a lot more of a positive response. Now, mind you, we did So we did sell every license. So we did end up doing that, and it's actually grown since then. And we've helped Exactware, and we've helped you guys, the restorers, save a lot of money. And not that we haven't helped Exactware save a lot of money. We've helped the restorers. We've subsidized it, like I said. We did the same thing with Matterport cameras. We did a lot of different things to just try to help the industry. And it's so funny how the response was just kind of all over the place. So yeah, I think it's important that if you're going to be in this industry and you're going to really take your business to the next level, and you're an entrepreneur and you're independent and you're not necessarily a part of, let's say, a franchise system, which is a lot more rigid, which is in a lot of ways is not a bad thing. I mean, there really is some good stuff that comes out from that as well. You've got to be open to the fact that, there's maybe things out there that you're not tapping into, or maybe things out there that you're not getting access to today, because right now you get up every day. I always say this to these independents. They say, every day you get up unemployed. You may have a company that's great, but you're by yourself every day. You're hustling, you're grinding every single day. And it doesn't have to be that way. You can really, if you're open and willing to tap into all these other things, that's really great. Now back to the best practices question. Sorry, that was a ramble. There is, best practices do evolve, obviously. And so we're constantly looking not just at our team to build those best practices, but we also are looking to our successful members. Again, I've got members that are doing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. They know what it took to get from $1 million a year to $100 million a year. Some of them, know how to get from, 20 to 100 or 1 to 20 or whatever. And we look at them and say, what did you do? And what did you do differently? And how can we take that and sort of systemize it and then give it to your fellow members? And the great thing about this group, and this goes back to them caring about the greater success of this whole group, is they're not just willing to share, they're willing to contribute and write those policies and write those white papers. And yes, this is great. And so I love that about this group of these people. I just think they're not only so talented, but they're willing to share the wealth. And that's something that I think is where a lot of our best practices
Yeah, and
come
just
from.
being collaborative. Again, there's several different camps and schools of thought on this, right? There's people that are constantly, worried about where their next meal is coming from, and everybody's competition, everybody's after their
Sure.
bone. And then there's another, school of thought where it's like, hey man, there's really more than enough to go around. You're not going to take what's meant for me is meant for me, One thing that I will say, I think is still lacking to some degree, and I think that this is changing with the newer breed of restoration contractors that are coming into the market, is how they perceive education and how they are looking for those voids that they have that don't make them a quote unquote complete entrepreneur, right? And sometimes these are the soft skills. Sometimes these are leadership skills. Sometimes this is accounting skills. Sometimes this is just plain and simply taking the tech hat off and saying, hey, you know what? I'm no longer a water tech, mold remediation tech. I'm no longer a roofer. I'm a business owner. And now I need to get familiar with all of these other arenas,
Right.
like marketing and everything else, right? So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, do you think that there's an evolution that you've seen in the industry with just how the sophisticated restorer, let's call them, right, are coming into the market now with a whole different lens of how to approach this business?
Yeah, and I love that you said that. I think that what I've noticed different today versus, let's say, 15 years ago is a lot of restorers 15 years ago got into the industry, either started their own company or maybe they joined another company or maybe it was a family business. There's all these different scenarios. And they started with sort of the school of hard knocks. I did the work. I was out in the field. I was the tech, all of that. And so myopically focused on restoration that they did not add those additional skills, like you said, the soft skills, the marketing skills, really the skills to be a better business person. And I think that that's also the difference between what we're trying to do and what I've been trying to do for years is to get them to realize that, they need those extra skills in order to really sustain their
Right.
growth long term. You can't just know the technical side of this industry and have zero soft skills or zero business. I encourage restorers all the time, whether they're members or not, go back and get a business degree. If you don't have one already. But what I'm seeing different today is talk about sophisticated restorers, some incredibly impressive, talent coming into this industry, folks that are starting companies in this industry because they clearly see the opportunity, but they're coming to the table with all of those skills already pre-baked in. So those soft skills, the marketing skills, the skills and knowledge around acquisition and understanding how to value their businesses and all of that stuff. And we're seeing a lot more of that coming down the pike. And that's really exciting and impressive to see. Not to say that if you've built a business, based on, I got into this business because my brother is a restorer and he's got into this industry the way that most people do. He got in, he was a technician and he built his way up, and he's, since run a couple small companies and really done very, very well. But the difference is, I'm seeing a lot of the difference today is companies that are coming in more with like the business background already, and then applying that to restoration. And those are the companies I think that are going to be long-term, are going to truly kind of take their business to the next level and be able to sustain this growth long-term. So, we're constantly encouraging folks to look outside of this industry for knowledge. Like there's enough technical knowledge in this industry. There's enough knowledge we get from our industry association
and frankly,
other places,
and
right?
something that
There's
I've mentioned, tons of times on the podcast is that's not going to grow your business. Drying a building in 2 days as opposed to 3 days is not the reason why your business is going to scale.
That's correct.
Period. And we could argue that till, we're blue in the face. And I'm sure that there's some good arguments on both sides. But, talent is cheap in all walks of life. I mean, when we were, my wife and I were in California, we would go to the 3rd Street Promenade, and there was these amazing street singers. And I'd sit there and I was like, man, why don't these people have like record deals, right? And if you look at a lot of business owners, right, they've got the skills. They care more about their customers. They really care about their employees, but then they're struggling every single Friday to make payroll or to make their rent. And it's not because they're not great people. They're amazing people, amazing techs, but they're just missing that one thing. And and to some degree, I believe it's a limiting belief, right? Because you have to be able to break out and say, hey, you know what? Like this thought that, because I don't have a degree or because I don't know accounting or because I don't know marketing, I can't acquire these skills, right? So there's a certain limiting belief and mindset aspect to that. But that being said, you got to get you got to get up to par, and you got to be willing to play. And more importantly, you got to be willing to ask for help and ask for assistance and be like, hey, you know what, Dan, I'm a small restoration owner over here, and I've got this issue that I'm sure you've probably experienced. Like, what would you do? And that takes a certain degree of humility, right? Because you're like, oh, man, that's tough.
Sure,
like, I'm asking
absolutely.
for help, but that's really what gets you to that next level.
Well, and to be clear, I'm not saying
right. I was just using that as an example.
Just to be clear about that. I'm not saying no, but I want to make sure that I clarify what I meant by that. I didn't mean go back to school and get a degree. What I meant was what you just said. Have the foresight to say, I need some help. And I think, and these are the areas I need some help and direction in. And what I found is we have looked at and analyzed companies in just our group of companies, that the ones that have kind of that edge and have made that extra step or just go a little bit further. And all of them have one thing in common, is that they're all operating on some sort of an operating system of sorts. They're operating on some sort of a business system that they've implemented. And, we here at Core, my internal team, we have an operating system we operate off of. We have then taken that and then actually made it restoration friendly. And a lot of our, we call them our branded members. They're from a revenue perspective on the smaller side but we're catching them at that perfect point where they're open and willing to kind of grow and scale their business. And we've taken that system and said, let's create it for restoration, but make it that system light, so that they can take it in bite-sized pieces and they have that resource base, that they can tap into. But that's really the key. It's not go back to school. The key is look outside of this space, because there are other industries that are wildly successful, and it's because they're backed by people who are maybe looking outside of their peer group or outside of their industry. And a big part of what we constantly emphasize too is having the right mindset, right, to be able to be successful in this industry. You've got to have the right mindset. You've got not just have the desire and the hustle to do it. You've also got to take away those limiting beliefs and know that you can get as big as you want to get in this industry. You can get as successful, as wealthy as you want to get in this industry, but you've got to want it, and you've got to be able to step out of your own way enough to say that, okay, I don't know everything.
Exactly. I mean, one of the reasons why, like on our podcast, Restoration Domination, we bring in people that, are from all sorts of different industries, not even related to restoration. And a lot of people would say, well, why? I mean, the name of the title, like, the podcast is Restoration Domination, and this guy's like doing something totally different. Well, the guy's got $100 million a year company with 40 employees. I promise you, if we look close enough, we're going to be able to find, we can learn something and find a common denominator, right? And sure enough, the same traits are always there. And I think that's part of the blessing of the times that we live in, right? Is that we have, podcasts like this, we have videos, we got YouTube, we've got all of these different arenas to where, sometimes it's difficult, especially for a lot of entrepreneurs. What I've noticed is they became successful, or they are the first in their family or in their neighborhood to kind of break free a little bit. That's a tough cookie, because you don't have someone to call at the end of the day and be like, hey man, this is what I'm going through. How did you get through it? Because you're ahead of everybody else. So to be able to tap into resources and knowledge and to mentors into groups and things like that, virtually, I mean, that's a big lifesaver for a lot of entrepreneurs.
Well, I can tell you, the person you just described was me. I was the first person in my family to go. I come from a very, very, very large Sicilian family, right? So when I say very large, I mean, apparently they didn't watch TV.
That's like
they
my
just
family.
Had kids, right? And so, yeah. And so I was the first to go to college. I was the first to get a degree. I was the first to get a master's degree. I did all that. But I did it because of, my own desire to step out of that. I need to break. Now, mind you, I came from a family. I'm first generation. So, the mindset wasn't focused on, college. The mindset was, go to work. You've got to go to work and you've got to provide. And so a lot of folks in my family, incredibly talented people who they've built their livelihoods on go to work and provide, and not necessarily on go get a formal education. And what I realized also too was, although I was the first to do that, my formal education is not what got me, any success at all. Honestly, it helped a little bit because it allowed me to go, okay, I did this. I've got the confidence now to do that. But it also made me ask the questions I didn't think to ask before. That was the biggest thing. So it allowed me to analyze the world in a very different way. And your lens is so important if you think about it. If you're an up and coming, technician, if you're an upcoming, you're new to the industry, whatever role you got into, whether it was sales and marketing, doesn't matter. If you're not asking the right questions, you're never going to get the right answers. And what I always tell my team is, especially with someone who's new, we hire folks that are brand new to this industry. I don't know what you don't know, and I can't tap into your brain. So if you don't ask those questions, I'm just going to assume you know it, and that's it. And what that formal education gave me was to be able to go, I don't know this, and I should probably ask these questions because apparently this stuff's important, right? And so, and that's what I did, is I asked the right questions, and I learned from some pretty incredible people in this industry who mentored me in a very big way. And it's funny now that I'm at the age that I'm at, and I've got kids, and I'm where they were when I was the 23-year-old who got into this industry. It shocks me sometimes. I still think I'm 23, right? And I go, what? Somebody wants advice from me? Like, what do I? And I'm like, okay, right. I guess I've been doing this for a while, and you forget, but it's kind of cool to see that evolution. And I love watching the light bulb go off in restorers. Like when we talk about certain topics that they're like, oh, I never thought I would look at it from that angle. And I just absolutely love the light bulb going off. It's probably a big reason you do the show, because you can see the light bulb going off in people. It's a high for me, as I'm sure it is for you, to just help other people be successful. I think that's really cool.
That's awesome. And on that note, let's go ahead and take a moment to thank our sponsors. Photo documentation is possibly one of the most important aspects of what it is that we do in the restoration business. Not only so that the client knows exactly what's going on, but also so that you can prove your work to insurance companies. One of the best ways that I found to go ahead and document our projects is by using Company Cam. Company Cam is an amazing app. It has so many features, everything from time-stamped and GPS located photos, individual project files, unlimited photo storage, in-app communication with your crew, a live stream of all of your projects as the photos are coming in, as if it was an Instagram feed. So from a managerial standpoint, Company Cam can help you there as well. But more importantly, it gives you the ability to protect your organization while documenting and keeping everything nice and neat. So we've got a really special offer for you you. If you go to companycam.com/dominate, not only will you get your 14-day free trial, but you're also going to get the first 2 months 50% off. So again, head on over to companycam.com/dominate. Get the app, and I'm sure you're going to love it. All right, guys. So we are back, and we're just talking about light bulbs and mentors and all of this good stuff, and really asking the questions that we probably don't even know that we should be asking, right? And that's tough, right? Because it's like, well, what am I even supposed to ask? I'm of the opinion, and this is kind of where I've been against the grain, I guess, for most restoration contractors out there, is I really want to let restoration contractors know that they're not restoration contractors. Like, that's a thing of the past. Like, you're not a restoration contractor. First and foremost, you're an entrepreneur. That's number one. But then number two, if you really had to put a label on you and your company, you're a marketer who's marketing restoration services. Now, I know that that's counterintuitive, because you're like, no, I'm a restoration contractor. I'm a general contractor. No, like, what you are really at the core, hey, that's a little pun, good little core.
It's why we picked it.
At the core of things, what you are is you're an entrepreneur who just so happens to have picked this particular series of services, and that's what you promote. And one of the things that you had mentioned is like kind of like how you have your in-house agency that your core members can kind of tap into. I believe, and this is my personal opinion, I'm kind of doing a prediction here, that there's a lot of VC money that's coming into the space, right? Like, people finally realize, oh shit, there's money with fans. There's money with DUs. Like, there's some action here, right? Maybe we should look at this space. We also discussed how there's the new breed of sophisticated entrepreneur, sophisticated restorer, let's call them, that's coming into the space. Now these guys are starting to realize what questions they need to ask, what skills they need to start to develop, who they need to be bringing in-house. I personally believe that even for the independents, the ones that are really going to have a winning shot to either A, be acquired because they're just so damn attractive, and or stand on their own 2 feet, is by bringing marketing in-house and really getting a strong understanding of what marketing really is. Now, before I kind of, start unpacking your brain on this subject, I want to get this very clear, because lately there's been this misunderstanding about what marketing really is. People now talk about marketing, they automatically think Facebook ads, they think, digital marketing, but marketing is marketing, right? Sales copy is sales copy, direct mailers still work, phone calls still work, emails, text messages, all this stuff still works. It's just how you bring it all together that's really how the sauce is made. What's your opinion on that long-winded statement that I just made about bringing marketing in-house and the importance of understanding it, and how you think that will affect companies that do not do that, and as opposed to companies that do embrace that marketing aspect and bring that in-house so that they can go ahead and hunt their own meals?
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more with that. I think companies that do not bring that in-house, who rely on sort of external sources to kind of constantly feed them, I think can be really challenging. Marketing is interesting. When you talk about someone in this industry who is an account development person, a biz dev person, who's out there building relationships that are established on behalf of their company. What do we refer to them in this industry as? Marketers, right? The marketer. And really, no, that's business development. Totally different than marketing, right? Marketing sort of sets the tone for your ability to go and get that work. Whereas, sales, business development is you going out and developing those relationships and those accounts. And so, yeah, I think bringing marketing in-house and bringing the ability to do that yourself in-house, I think, is really, really critical to any successful company. And that applies really to any industry, truly. I mean, we are unique in this industry that there's clearly external sources that feed our contractors' work, right? So, okay, no different than a doctor. If you think about it, I always liken this to the medical industry. So doctors, how did they used to get patients? They would go to like the local farmer's market and say, hey, Rico, I've got a small practice here. Bring your kids, we'll be your doctor. That's how it used to be done. Or Yellow Pages and more traditional. But really, it was about building, boots on the ground relationships. Now doctors can open up a practice and join a program. They can join, the I'm not going to name off the medical companies, but, all the different, HMOs, PPOs, and all these different things. And they can pick and choose which programs they want to be on, no different than a contractor. And suddenly they're fed patients. So if you've ever changed your medical insurance and tried to find a doctor, right, you'll see they accepting new patients. And sometimes they get to capacity and say, no, we're not accepting new patients, because they've gotten so much from these programs and they become reliant on the program that they no longer build those relationships. So then what happens? If you look at the direct correlation, that I can't be the only person that's thought about this. When you go into a doctor's office and you've got medical insurance from your employer, or if you're you own your own company and you've got your medical insurance and you go into a doctor's office, how often does the doctor really spend time with you anymore to really get to know you and say, hey, Rico, what's bugging you? What's going on? Whatever.
How's the family?
Well, how often? Yeah, never happens.
Done.
No, it's like, no, I'm on to the next room. I've got to get over to the next room and grab the chart from the door and do the same thing over and over. And then they leave and you're thinking, shit, I had questions about one more thing I wanted to ask. And it doesn't happen because they have to sort of churn and burn, no different than a restorer does, right? They have to get in, get out, because they've got the next assignment to get to. And so I feel like, it's important for people to recognize that those relationships that you build at a local level are critical. Those marketing practices that you're doing within your company that are ultimately going to transcend into work for your company have to be supported, and they have to happen. You can't just wing it and say, okay, well, I'm just going to rely on this program work. I can't count the number of folks that say, oh, we're successful, and then the minute they get pulled from a program, it's done. They plummet in revenue. They just become a totally different operation. And so marketing is such a broad topic, as you said, everything from digital marketing to, traditional marketing, advertising, you name it. But it is so very critical, and it's underappreciated, I would say, by a lot of owners. The other thing I hear constantly is owners who will hire a marketer, a biz dev person, and they'll give them 3 months and go, that person didn't work out and I've let them go.
Right.
And it's like, hold on a minute. When I got into this industry, I actually came from the advertising space, believe it or not. And so when I got into this industry, it took me a solid year before I actually realized what we actually did. And so what's funny is, I told somebody this recently, I think it was 10 years in that I was like, I finally sell this pretty easily now. It took time, right? It took time. And the thing is, you can't bring somebody into your company and expect them to deliver overnight. It doesn't work that way. You've got to think of them as an investment that's going to keep getting better and better and better and better. And the more you nurture that investment, including giving them the tools to be able to advertise and do all the things they have to do, they're there to spend your money, to make you money. And so, and once you get that, I think you can be unstoppable.
What have you seen is the quickest shot on the arm, the fastest way for someone? Let's just assume this is an independent organization. They're not being fed work. They're the backbone of what the majority of restoration companies really are, right?
Sure.
Some people call them a chuck in a truck. I really hate that term.
So do I. I hate that term.
It's horrible, right? So anyways, this individual's trying to figure out, hey, how do I get new business? What would be your suggestions when it comes down to, and there were two scenarios here, right? They have more time than money, or they have more money than time. What would you recommend in either one of those scenarios? Well, from a marketing standpoint.
I was going to very selfishly say, well, join Core.
That would have been amazing. If you would have said that.
No, I actually almost did, because here's why. I don't think it's really about, and I know you're going to think this is one-sided, but I'm going to say it anyway. I don't think it's really about Core. I think what it is build a peer group. Build a healthy peer group in this industry. Get to know other restorers that are of the same mindset, that are here to also care about your success. If I could give advice to anyone who had more money than time, more time than money, is truly understand that you don't have all the answers, and you've got to very quickly get acclimated to the market, and you've got to know the market and understand, who you're competing with. And by the way, even in your local market, spend some time with your competition and build a peer group, connect with them, because they're dealing with some of the same stuff you're doing. And that's the other thing too, is some of these companies that are truly successful in their local markets have been able to successfully build strong relationships with their direct competitors, and be able to, when I'm too busy, can I give you work? Or when you're too busy, throw the work my way. All of that. It doesn't have to be such an aggressive, we're all out to kill each other thing, And so in some of our markets, we've got 5 or 6 members that are all in the same, major metro area. and they absolutely support each other every single day. And so I would say understand your market, get educated as quickly as possible on the industry and kind of trends and what's happening. And more importantly, be a part of something bigger than yourself. You've got to be I've said this 100 times. All the success I have ever seen in this industry that I've helped people succeed in this industry with has been be a part of something bigger than yourself, and also vet out those systems too. Because there's a few groups out there that I think on the surface, claim to deliver value, but the meat on the bones is what's the company that you're keeping. Make sure you're keeping the right company. Make sure that you're aligned with companies that you can proudly say, oh, guess what? Carrier client or commercial client, we're a part of the family of these companies, and that you can put their logos on your wall and be just as proud as your own. I mean, that's really critical. And there were times, I remember being a part of a group where, it's funny because I've talked to leadership at some of the franchise groups, and they will say that all their locations are great, but then they'll say, but if you want to list, there's these top 100 that are great, and these are the ones they need some work. There's not one company in our system that I would ever be ashamed of saying, oh, they're a part of our system, because they keep good company, right? And we vet them hard, and we make sure that they're not just a good fit for us, but they're a good fit for the other people in the system. And so every time we bring someone new on, they're welcome with open arms by this group of people, because they know that we've taken the time to make sure that they're not just like kind and quality. They are best in class in their market, but they've got the right mindset. And so for someone new in this space, I would say, get to know the other people in your space, because they may be your biggest advocates one day. They may be the people that give you your biggest opportunity that then catapulted your business to a whole nother level. And if you go at this with the sense that, I know it all and I'm not really, I can't learn anything from these people, you're going to fail. And there's a lot of failure that's happening in this space, just like every other industry, right? We are a recession-proof industry. We're a pandemic-proof industry, we've proven, right? And that was pretty scary. That put companies out of business who had been in business 60 years, right? We've endured all of that. And yet there's still a chance that you're not going to be able to make it through the next thing, right? Because you might not have the right mindset.
Right. So what are some of the other, and again, we understand we've kind of covered some of the suites and some of the, offerings that, core members get. What are their major takeaways? If we join core, what other things can we expect besides just this amazing network of individuals and the in-house marketing stuff that you guys have access to? What are their major benefits and features and stuff like that?
Sure. So we've built the largest and fastest growing buying program in the industry. What I mean by that is stuff that these companies are already spending money on today. We offer, incredible industry pricing on, rebates on top of that, access to resources that they wouldn't necessarily normally have. A great example is during one of the hurricanes, I think it was last year or the year before, a company was thinking of joining Core, and then they joined Core right before this hurricane happened. And they called one of the national distributors and said, I need a few pallets of equipment. And they said, sorry, it's been allocated, right? It happens all the time. We don't have anything. We're out 6 weeks or whatever. And they called us and said, well, what the heck? This company is one of your big vendors. And we said, well, did you tell them you were a member of Core? And they said, oh, no, we didn't even think about that. Called the vendor back and had equipment drop shipped and on site within 24 hours. And so having that pool for our contractors is huge for us. And so our buying program is massive. We have saved millions of dollars for these contractors in the last 2 years on just the stuff that they're already buying every day. So that's huge in itself. And then also, education, coming to our annual conference and trade show. We do what's called a conference experience, which is not about the technical training that we've talked about. It's not about how to dry a house. It's about how to, what does it mean to be a business leader, and how that can be a lonely seat, and how to balance that and really kind of reconcile that. Or there's a wellness element piece to this, being mindful, as an owner of a company, and understanding what that means to your employees, and how if you can just sharpen your saw in that way, your employees' experience will be exponentially better. And so we do a lot of that sort of out of the box stuff.
That's amazing. Well. So what do you see, looking out into the landscape of the restoration arena? What are your ideas? What do you think is going to be the next 5 years, 10 years? What do you think the market's going to be looking like? Do you think we're going to be seeing a lot more VC capital coming in? Do you think that there's going to be a lot more mergers and acquisitions? What do you see in the landscape happening?
Well, I think money is cheap right now. So therefore, we're seeing it right now. I think that once that tide shifts, and it's really all based on the economy, once that tide shifts, we will see that slow down. Do I think it's going to stop, permanently? No. I think it will continue to ramp up as long as money is cheap, right? What I will say is, to most restorers is if you want to be in this space and you're truly passionate about being in this space and you care for and love this industry, don't go into this simply with the lens of being bought, right?
Although
of,
there is a benefit to going in and anything that you do with the mindset of being bought, because that's going to make such a great business model, even if you don't really want to get bought, but just going. Yeah,
I don't disagree with that. I think you're 100% correct. Yeah. But also understanding that if you don't get purchased, with that, whatever window that is, that hopefully you've got the runway to continue to run this business, and there wasn't a predefined end date for yourself. And have you built a succession plan for you, right? I mean, how often do you hear that, like someone who's aged out, right? They're like, I just want to retire, but I've got no one to take over my business, whether it's I don't have children or my children don't want to be in this space, or I haven't mentored someone else to kind of take over. That's critical as well. But yeah, so I would say that, trend wise, that I think is what's going to happen in our space. We are going to see a lot more consolidation. I think that some companies are consolidating into single entities now for the sake of protecting their long-term, longevity. I don't love the idea of companies, acquiring and putting companies out of business, which is kind of what's happening as well. And what I mean by that is, acquiring a company and just making it a new office for them, and that's it. Because I think that if you really look at the data around that, employees tend to leave. Profitability, believe it or not, actually goes down by office. There's a lot that's kind of interesting there. So, I mean, I would say, I'm hoping, technology has evolved a lot in this industry over the last, 10 years. I'm hoping to see more of that, a lot more AI being introduced into sort of the process, and I'm hoping to see a lot more of that evolution happening. But I mean, I think that you're going to start to see more and more consolidation. I think that groups like us and other groups as well, I think are going to be more and more important to the independent restorer who realizes, okay, I can't do this alone. I've got to be a part of something else, or I can still be a part of something else, but yet still remain independent, not lose the soul of my business, which I think is really key. You don't have to join something and then just kind of go, well, take the wheel. It doesn't work that way. You've still got to do the work. But at least you're not doing it alone, right? You can still call on anyone, us, them, fellow members, all that stuff, to be able to say, like, I'm in a conundrum. I don't know how to handle the situation, and be able to do that without fear of, I can't believe this guy doesn't know this, or, any of that stuff. Like, truly understanding you're a part of a group that truly supports you. I think that that's going to be key. I think you're going to see more of those groups popping up. I've seen a few of them pop up, but it's a heavy lift. I'll be honest with you. I would never discourage. I'm about everyone's success, truly. I would never discourage someone from starting a group like this, but it is a very heavy lift. If you don't have the experience and know how to do that, it's a very heavy lift. Because imagine all of these independents, they're all entrepreneurs. Every single one of them is an entrepreneur. All of which, and all those entrepreneurs think that they know the right way to do everything, but yet still are a part of a group because they know that they don't know the right way to do everything. So it's an interesting dynamic that you have to know how to manage that group of minds. But it's also incredibly exciting for me and for my team because this is what we love to do.
Right. So now you mentioned technology, and now obviously I believe in technology. I think the technology used properly could really go ahead and save a tremendous amount of time, could increase profitability, things like that. One of the biggest issues that we hear with a lot of restoration business owners is the restoration, software, like the software that they're using in order to manage their job sites and their billing and all of that stuff. What's your take on some of the good ones in the market, some of the bad ones in the market? Like someone's in the middle, like what's kind of your take on that technology side of things?
Yeah, we had this conversation yesterday, believe it or not. We had our elite and our member and elite member group had an ownership call, and that subject came up about software technology because a couple of the members were looking for a technology solution to implement in their company. And there are so many options today on the market. There's like 5 or 6 maybe even more technology solutions that are the job management or company management systems. There's some similarities to those systems, but they also operate all very, very differently, right? And most of those systems were not built to serve the entire industry. They were built to help the company that created them. So you've got like a company who created a software because it worked for them and then said, I'm going to replicate this and sell it to the industry. And about 4 or 5 of them, that's exactly what happened. And they're good. They're all good in their own way, but you have to take them all for a test drive and figure out which ones are better than others. I won't sit here and tell you which ones I think are better than others because that wouldn't be fair. And we have partnerships with a lot of these companies because I think that there's value in all of them. That was a very political answer.
Oh, that was 100% right.
So,
that's like all the more reason for me to dig
right
deep.
There. Oh, dig away. Yeah, no, 4 of them are actually owned by core companies. Core members own 4 of the softwares that are out there are owned by core companies. So and they all are good in their own way. They're all very different, and they all offer something a little bit different. But I don't also like anything. I don't think it's one size fits all. It would be nice if every company was on a single operating system. Certainly would make my job easier, especially with building the un-TPA, because at least I would know that they have a way that they do things in their internal systems and not forcing them to have to like get out of their system and into ours and all this kind of stuff. Now, what we are doing is we recognize because these technologies exist and there's so many different ones, and it would be incredibly painful for them to leave their systems and move to something new. We are developing sort of a hub, if you will, that will plug into all of these places so that at least if you're a part of core, at least you would then be in one central hub and then be able to push and pull data to your own system and not go, my people have to copy and paste and move the back and forth and log in here and log out there and all of that. Because that's the other thing too. The administrative burden on this industry has become so just overwhelmingly painful that I just feel like if you've got to hire a full-time admin just because you rolled out a job management system, what is wrong with that picture? Like, I think that there's something very wrong with that. There are some really great ones though, that I will tell you that don't require you to do that actually put the power in the hands of the people out in the field, the management in the office, whatever. And everyone does their part to contribute to that technology. And it doesn't require you to have someone who is literally administering your software, which, in 2022 seems a little bit much.
Right. So changing gears, because we're about to wrap up here. Something that I typically ask all of my guests is if they have their top 3 book suggestions, books that have inspired you, books that have made you a better entrepreneur, whatever really moved you. I mean, do you have a top 3 books that have really created an impact on you?
Yeah. So I would say the first and the pinnacle of them all that I give this to friends, family, business associates, new employees, you name it, is one called The 4 Agreements. The 4 Agreements is a book that, it has nothing to do with our really business, if you will. It's 4 Agreements to Live Your Life by Paulo Coelho. Fantastic book. And I actually, a couple of years back, purchased like 500 copies and gave it to all these folks at a conference and was like, you need to read this. Because by understanding and living by the 4 Agreements, you actually can place an entirely different lens on your life. You don't take things personally. You realize it's not about you. You really attack life in a very different way. So I would say every business person should read that. The second one, Tony Hsieh, the late Tony Hsieh, who's the founder of Zappos, did a book called Delivering Happiness. And so I remember years ago reading this book and thinking, interesting, the lens this man used to build a shoe company, right? An online shoe company, and all the trials and tribulations of that, but really with the end message of, you're in the customer service business, regardless of what industry you're in. You're in the customer service business. You're not in restoration. You're in the customer service or customer experience business, but within your space. And so Delivering Happiness was always a great one. I love that one. And then recently, we adopted, now many of our members are adopting a system called EOS. If you're familiar with EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System. So it's based on a book called Traction. And trust me, Traction is not, for anyone who's not an owner of a business, Traction's going to be a snoozer, right? But if you are an owner and looking to dial up your business, it's such simple practice, right? That Traction was one that I recently was like, okay, this makes sense, right? And so then there's a lot of operating systems out there, but Traction was one in particular. But I would say if I had to, the top 2 would be Delivering Happiness and the 4 Agreements.
Awesome, man. And if anybody listening and watching the show, they want to reach out to you, want to connect with with Core, they want to learn more, where should they go?
They can just go to gowithcore.com. So GOWITHCORE, gowithcore.com. Everything Core is found there. Access to our conference, access to our programs, access
That's
to
right. The
membership
conference as well.
Let's
go ahead and talk about that. The conference is July 24th through the 26th, right?
Yep, July 24th to 26th in Austin, Texas. We commandeer an entire hotel, and we're expecting this year about 700 in attendance, and really phenomenal agenda, incredible speakers. We've got about 8 carriers attending who are just as invested in the success of this group as the group themselves. So that's really, really exciting to see that carrier participation. And so, yeah, that will be a game changer. Not a lot of conferences are able to bring them both into one place. And so we've done a really good job at creating that balance, and it's been great.
That's awesome. So I will leave a link in the show notes and in the video description below, not only to Dan, but also to Core, as well as the registration for the upcoming collective conference experience and trade show July 24th through the 26th at Marriott Austin downtown. So that'll be really exciting if you guys want to check that out. And on that note, Restoration Nation, tons of great information here that was shared today. Thank you so much, Dan. We appreciate you taking the time and sharing. And we should do this again sometime because I think we left so much more to unpack.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome, guys.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Restoration Domination, interviewing the restoration business's top industry insiders, the movers and shakers, the hustlers and hackers. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. Hook up with us on Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Restoration Domination to catch video interviews, highlights, and behind-the-scenes content. And follow your host at Rico Garcia Jr. Till next time, this is Restoration Domination. Hustle, hack, dominate.